Greetings, this is Chris. I am inviting you to come on into the Enola Frost Studio Workshop. And it's evening now. My previous videos I was able to film during the daytime hours, but as I mentioned before, I am a teacher and things got very real today after winter break when I went back. So I expect to see my filming pace slow a little bit, but I wanted to try to keep some momentum going. I shared with you recently a little haul that I had from a brick and mortar store here in my community. And one of the items that I picked up on clearance was this memory box set called Layered Cosmos. And I mentioned it doesn't look like much. And when you take the die out, this is what it looks like. These are, excuse my dirty fingers, this is what it looks like. And so you cut everything in one pass. If you are more of a gel printer and you are not accustomed to doing die cutting, I want to give you a quick demonstration. I have my tiny little Tim Holtz Sidekick here, and it has plates that look like this. I believe they're 2.5 inches across. And so what I want to do is I want to cut just smaller than this. And I just pulled out a gel print from my collection. I have already cut out some of these layered cosmos, but what I learned was I need a little firmer paper. I was cutting out prints that I had done on deli paper, and it works, but they are a little fragile the way this particular die cut is designed, because where each of these lines are in the petals, it actually cuts through. So when you pull this up, you have 4 little strips, which is a lot of places that you can break the deli paper. Because this is just copy paper, I will easily be able to run 2 pieces through at a time and be able to die cut. If I were using cardstock, that would be a little more challenging. But you put your base plate in, you put your paper next, you put the die cutting side down, so all the detail is cutting side down, and then you put a top plate, and oh, I have my Sidekick backwards. There we go. And then you run the plates through by cranking the handle. I put this paper down to avoid glare, but I didn't get it down very well. So if you see a strange movement there, that would be why. And they're stuck. My really fancy trick is to keep a sewing pin handy, and I just find one of the openings on the back side, apply a little pressure, and get the first piece up. You'll notice the way these dies are designed. There are these little holes in them, and that is to specifically help you get stuck pieces out of the die. For some dies, they come out much easier than others, and if you're using thicker cardstock, they also come out easier. So this is, remember, this is 2 layers. I'm going to have to peel them apart in a moment, but I'm going to go ahead and cut my second set of strips that I already have prepared. Please excuse all the shadows tonight. I like the size of this Sidekick for when I'm doing specifically small dies like this, and especially if I'm changing colors a lot, it's nice to just be able to use the small one. But if I were to be cutting out a variety of blooms at the same time, then I would level up. I just have a simple big shot, and that is my preference for kind of a standard size die cut machine. All right, so now, like I said, these are 2 layers. It's a little bit of work to separate them. I'm just doing it gently. So with 2 passes through a die cutter, using just one all-in-one die, these are the pieces that I get out. Okay. Now I'm able to layer them. This is how they're designed to be used. So you go from a very simple little bloom, and then you layer them, and you get a really lovely, realistic looking bloom made out of paper. And if you want, you can even use a petal shaper, which would look something like this, and you could give some texture to them just by rubbing the spherical end over the paper on like a foam surface. Now, I believe this is meant to have 2 sizes of blooms. Okay, so that I would get 2 flowers. They're sticking to my fingers. You'd get 2 flowers out of those 2 passes. But you can also make up your own flowers. You can use the large size and piece the small one on top of it. You can make it look like a different flower. I don't prefer that here, but something that I do like the look of is once you've layered up some of the larger ones, put a smaller one or a couple smaller ones in the middle of that. So with more layering in the background, I think that is a nice touch too. It just gives it a little different dimension. So those are the basics of using a die cut with your gel prints. And you can see here that I cut a number of blooms. And so I'm going to layer the blooms up, and I'm going to glue them together and just show you what my little collection looks like at the end. This is just the first use that I'm demonstrating of the layered cosmos to somehow connect die cutting and gel printing. Lighting is so poor. But there you go. So as easy as that, I have little clusters of flowers. They're not all the same. I didn't try to make them all the same. You could, absolutely, if you wanted to, but I chose some sort of coordinating colors, and because some of the sheets were deli paper, they have that bit of transparency. So this is what they look like when they are just paper. Okay, so that is my first use. These could adorn greeting cards, and they're very thin. They could also go on a scrapbook layout or an art journal page. So that is my use number 1 of the the layered Cosmos die cuts. My second idea to use the die cuts is going to need the gel plate and the cardstock die cuts that we just did. I'm going to lay down a layer of color on my gel plate. Moderate, it doesn't have to be very thin, but neither should it be very thick. Off to the side, I'm rolling off my brayer on a random magazine. And now I'm going to make a pattern just using the principle of triangles in kind of pattern design. So I took my 3 large blooms and made a triangle. Now I'm going to take these and create another triangle. With these 2, I'm going to do wet paint stuck to my finger. Do another triangle, but I still have the small blooms, so I'm going to add one here to make a triangle, and I don't have a ton of space. Okay, that one's a little trickier to place. Now that I didn't mean to put there, I just accidentally sort of dropped it, but that's where it's going to have to live. And do one more here, and I'm also going to put the centers in just to fill in the awkward spots. I didn't mean to put that, it just fell out of my hand. Essentially, I'm using my die cuts as masks. A piece of deli paper and lay it over the top. And I'm going to pick up around the blossom shapes. If I wanted these to look more realistic, like the multi-layered cosmos, I could glue a couple or 3 blooms together before I put them down on the gel plate. But I'm just trying to show you their versatility. Adorable gel print number 1, which will quickly be followed by adorable gel print number 2. We have the additional bonus here of the white cardstock blooms getting some color on them. I did that on purpose. Oh my gosh, these are really cute. This is even cuter than I expected. The details of the cut lines in the dies really left behind an amazing ghost print. So before I go on to pick that up, now you see I have yet another flower design. Make an effort to get even more paint on them. You could spritz them with a dye. There are lots of things you could do for these to be usable. Again, on a greeting card, on scrapbook layout. Just sweet little blooms. All right, I'm going to push them off to the side, and we're going to pick up. I absolutely adore orange and pink together. So first I use the vivid red orange. It's semi-transparent, and my rose pink is actually an opaque color. While it is still wet, I'm going to put my same deli paper down. Make sure it has good contact, and then I will wait a little longer for this one to dry so that I get a good pickup. All right, the print should be fairly dry now. Look at that. That is a simple print, but an absolute winner. I could use these together, or I could use them separately. I could layer this over the top of it to even change the color more. Chef's kiss. I love how this turned out. All right, that is way number 2 with die cuts and the gel plate. For my next idea, I want to die cut some more deli papers. I want something really thin and translucent, and so I stacked up a bunch of them and made them a good size to use with my Sizzix Sidekick. But you may have noticed in some of the previous footage that these are getting stuck in the die, and that makes it very tedious to work. So I cut a piece of parchment paper. It's not even fresh, it's used. Not used for baking, just used here in the craft room. And I'm putting that between my die and the papers that I'm going to cut. Now my biggest challenge here is not letting things slide before I get them through the die cutter. So run these through, and this should make a pretty significant difference to being able to get things out of the dies quickly. And then I also finally took the time to go find this Cricut tool that is for weeding if you do any Cricut vinyl work, but it really is the best thing to pop dies out of the holder. So see how that made such a difference? It's just everything is out now. And I can separate all of the pieces of my blossoms and go on to the next step. All right, I'm going to be switching mediums. I never know, is it medium? I'm switching mediums, or am I switching media? I don't know. Someone can tell me, maybe. I'm going from the acrylic paint that I was using to water-based dye inks. Okay. So I have a couple of colors here from the Catherine Pooler line, Clay Mask and Mandarin Spice. And I'm going to lay out the individual blooms on here. That one I cut off, but I'll see if I might be able to use it anyway. And again, I'm putting them down in a bit of a pattern. I don't very often work with my dye inks for something like this, but I had the idea of a translucent petal. So that's why I'm going in this direction. Okay, that's not going to fit on there, but I still have the small pieces to do, so I'll come back to those. All right, in the background, I'm going to use the Clay Mask. I've been noticing my inks are really dry, so I may have to stop and re-ink, but nope, they look pretty good. Okay, so I'm just tapping, and this works quite nicely because the gel plate works like a sticky mat, and it holds these pieces down so that I can actually ink them up. All right, I'm going to dry them. It will go much quicker with the dye-based ink, but it's very likely that some will stay damp on the gel plate. I've got to look into the viewfinder and realize you can't see anything. That doesn't make it a lot better, but at least you can see that there's something on the gel plate. These are pretty delicate. So I'll be removing, you can't see that at all. There you go. I'll be removing them one at a time, and I'll fast forward so you don't have to watch this delicate process. So I've started my collection of dyed blooms, and it's difficult to see, but there is still ink on the surface of the gel plate. And if you weren't aware, card makers also use gel printing with their various inks. Pick up, and you have just a lovely soft background, and you can keep building on that. And so I will do that with some of the darker color here in a moment. I'm using a plastic palette knife to help me. These are really stuck down, especially after applying the ink. And I'm working carefully, but by using the plastic, I'm hoping to avoid gouging my gel plate, because I've had it for a long time and I have managed not to get any terrible gouges in it. Kind of like to keep it that way. So I tore, I think, 3 of these small blooms, but I think I'm still left with plenty to accomplish my goal. Now I'm bringing back my deli paper that I printed the larger ones on, and I'm just going to lay it right over the top, and I'm going to print whatever was left behind of the mandarin spice color and the smaller prints. I'm not trying to be precious about this because I know there are fingerprints in here as well. So there's a cute little, very, very transparent background that I could use. Layer that over white, and that would help the color pop quite a bit more. But this is going to need a long time to dry. I noticed the coating on the deli paper is keeping the ink wet for a good long time. All right, I'm working on top of this white piece. I'm working on top of this white piece of paper so that you stand a chance of seeing these translucent blooms. And what I have here, this blue piece, is a fondant pattern from the baking section at Michael's. I have cut off the form because I use it in gel printing just to make patterns. And I have brought this out because I'm going to be putting resin on all of these blooms. I will do a few, and then I will turn off the camera and do the rest of them and come back when they're all completed. This product is a craft resin. This one is by Blue Moon Studio, and it's a UV resin. So I have a sacrificial paintbrush, and I'm going to very patiently, I say that in all sincerity and sarcasm, very patiently going to apply it to each of these blossoms. And the reason I'm using this silicone, if you're not familiar with resin, is even when it cures on the paper, it will not adhere to the silicone. So I'll have to peel it up, and there will be some little edges that I will surely need to clean up, but I will be able to remove it from this surface. What's nice about this resin is that it doesn't get hard, so you have better working time with it. It only gets hard when you cure it under UV light. I'll get these down before my bird lands on it again. If you could see all of the behind the scenes today, the bird has flown over and spread these tiny little blooms. He just did it again, except more of the stuff is stuck down. So the blooms have been everywhere, and I have a very orangey tint to the hardwood floors in this room, and you can only begin to imagine how difficult it is to find these on that floor. Not to mention, it could use a good sweeping because paper crafting creates a lot of mess. And I think I'm only going to end up with 2 blooms when I'm done with all of this. So I think I only need 2 of the centers. Now I'm going to bring in my UV light. This UV light is actually for nails, and I thought if I got this, then I could use it for crafts and for nails. I got over the nails quite quickly, and now we have moved on to using it to craft. I find that the 90-second setting does a pretty good job for this purpose. I'm going to assemble the flowers with a little more of the resin. I'm hoping that it will work as an adhesive. Because the papers have become completely translucent. I think the UV will still cure. I ended up running the UV light about 3 times because they're just so delicate, and if there was any chance that the resin was still wet, I wanted to give it a chance to firm up. My project keeps shifting in my brain. I said I was going to do 2 blooms, but as you can see, I've gone to 1. And that's just because of how fine the blossoms are, even once they're well coated in the resin. Because I don't need a second, I'm going to go ahead and layer this up just to give a little more substance to my flower. All right, just a couple more cycles under the UV light. Well, here it is. Here is the final product. It looks like glass. because it was so fine and the deli paper really soaked up the resin, it is a very fragile little bloom. My original thought was actually to turn it into a pendant. That's what I was working towards. But this is not sturdy enough to turn into a piece of wearable art. So what would I do? What would I do with this? I could add it to a gift tag for a special gift. Put some ribbon behind it, put it on a gift tag. I think that would be really lovely. It's also thin enough that it could go on an art journal. It could be a bloom that you added to a canvas. I could see it on a very small canvas with a cool background painted and then just the one flower featured in the middle. That might be a fun piece of art. But it didn't end up in the direction that I was going today. I didn't want to give up completely on the idea though, so I tested it out on a piece of watercolor paper. Now, watercolor paper is much sturdier than the deli paper, and I worked with acrylic paints on that. And then I added the resin, and I actually stacked 2 blooms together, so there are about 6 of the individual die cuts on here to make the petals, and then another couple to make the flower center. This could conceivably be turned into a pendant. It's a lot smaller, and the hole punch I have was too big to use to string a cord or chain through. So I think what I would do is I would use the resin again, and I would put a jump ring on the back that I could thread my cord through. This one, for my taste, is a little too folksy, folk arty looking, but it would have gone really well with my bathroom in 1994 that was full of sunflowers. So this would have fit right in. This could serve as a dangle for an earring. If you wanted to make a couple of them, you could have a very nice lightweight pair of earrings. And because of the look of this one, another thought is it could be a barrette. It could be a cute child's barrette. So those were the ideas I had. That was the process that I worked through. And like I said, the outcome wasn't exactly what I was hoping for, but I still think it's an idea worth exploring. So in addition to the resin art, I will bring back my deli paper and printer paper blossoms, as well as my heavier weight cardstock blossoms, and 3 projects that also resulted in a number of gel prints. This one made with the water-based dye inks. I finally think it's dry now. I think it's been about 2 hours. These, which are my favorite of the gel prints that were done with the cardstock. And then this one you aren't seeing on screen because it was sort of the pickup from when I painted these with the acrylic. And at one point I had some red in there somewhere. I don't know what happened to it, but that's also a strange little pull. So lots of ideas. I would love to hear what you would do with die cuts and your gel plate. Thank you for being here today. Please come on back to the studio workshop anytime. Bye now. If you've ever wondered what all that noise is during my filming, it's this guy. This is the bathing beauty, also known as Cricket, the lovebird. By the way, that was his freshwater dish.